The murders of YNW members Juvie and Sack Chaser by one of their best friends has been one of the most heated court cases in recent memory. And one thing that has added plenty of fuel to the fire is the fact that YNW Melly has shown no remorse to the victims' families in court. No remorse. With the trial underway, Melly did not calmly sit on his chair when his life was on the line. In fact, he went viral for blowing a kiss in the courtroom.
Jamel Demons, known as YNW Melly or Melly, has been seen smiling and laughing in court, but it was this moment that is now being shared online.
Really?
He appears to be praying and then blows a kiss.
The mother of YNW Juvie was none too pleased.
He did it a couple times.
Yeah.
So he was doing it a couple times. That was his first time.
She was quite upset about the fact that Melly has shown no remorse and is not treating the trial with the seriousness it deserves.
What you praying for? Because you sitting over there like you don't got no remorse. Like every time I walk in, you smiling. You know, this ain't the time for that. This case is sad. This is serious.
The aunt of the other victim, YNW Sack Chaser, had this to say.
This somebody that we knew, this somebody that we loved, this somebody that we trusted. Like, we watched him grow up literally. So this is like a sad case. It's a tragic, and we just praying for justice.
And you can find strange behavior from Melly throughout the trial. Here he is, smiling away. And when he needs a pen from one of the police officers, he starts to put his hands up jokingly to the police officer. We then see Melly trying to clock eyes with someone in the courtroom. Once he sees them, he starts smiling. He is then nodding his head and smiling. Whether it is disrespectful or not, this is certainly not normal behavior for someone facing a double murder trial. And even the lawyers were providing everyone with a few laughs too. Melly's behavior throughout the trial has been incredibly disrespectful. Even if he is innocent, why would he be laughing and joking when not one but two grieving families are watching? The truth is, Melly has not been getting along with the families of Juvie and Sack Chaser. Prior to the killings, there was some tension between Sack Chaser and Melly's mom, both of whom saw each other as the person who spotted Melly's talent. And a video surfaced of Melly's mom claiming that Sack Chaser had been threatening her.
Showed me text messages from Sack Chaser threatening all her friends and all these people. Like, he's about this life. But I'm saying, like, who the fuck you ever robbed? Who the fuck you ever shot at? What the fuck you ever did? You couldn't even take a fucking weed charge.
Then Melly's mom sends out a warning.
And don't ever come for me. Because my credentials is real. It ain't even a joke. So don't ever try to come for me.
And then she explains that Melly's success was because of her and not because of him.
Melly is my child. And he is gonna be great because he's talented. He's talented because his mom, not because of your little ass retarded ass.
Juvie's father also alleges Sack and Melly were fighting.
You know the story that they say Sack beat him up and knocked his goals out in front of his girlfriend, and like 2 days later, I think that's when the incident happened.
And during the trial, the family feuds continued.
Apparently, Juvie's sister posted on, I guess, one of the social media outlets, and she said that she was going to harm Jamie King. And so that caused a big, issue in the courtroom. It wasn't anything that we got on tape, but it did happen this morning.
When Juvie's father first heard about what happened to his son, he was in no doubt about what happened.
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son's death on October 26th.
After his son's death, Juvie's father FaceTimed Melly and YNW Bortland, who was in the car when his son was killed. He did not get the reaction he anticipated.
His explanation, when I finally talked to him in court and on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits.
They also didn't explain to him what happened either.
Did they tell you anything about what they claimed happened with the drive-by they claim happened?
No. They had absolutely no explanation. Like, we had to figure it out just like the police.
So when the funerals were being organized for Juvie and Sack Chaser, Melly did not cover himself in glory.
They never came to town, never came to my son's funeral, never came to Sack's funeral. And these are your best friends. He passed straight through the county of Indian River, went to Remorse and did a music video, but he couldn't even stop and pay his condolences to his best friend's mom.
So Melly was too busy shooting a music video to go to his best friend Juvie's funeral. But they can count this as a blessing in disguise, given what happened at Sack Chaser's funeral.
He didn't come to the funeral. He came after, like, when we was sitting down eating. Came in dancing, happy dancing. Didn't show his respects to nobody. I remember that day.
Juvie's father also added some interesting information. Melly had tattoos on his face of Juvie and Sack Chaser, something he showed Adam, 22.
You know, I got a Sack Chaser right here. That's my brother. That's my twin.
Okay.
And I got Juvie.
Juvie?
Yeah, brother.
Just a lot of your friends who passed?
Yeah. Nah, them my right there.
But have you ever noticed that Melly has been wearing turtleneck sweaters during the entire trial? Well, Juvie's father has a theory. Melly has a tattoo of the name Jana on his neck, which was initially as a tribute to Sack Chaser's mom.
He even got Jana tatted on his neck. That's why his defense attorney got him wearing turtlenecks and shirt to hide his neck, because he got Jana tatted on his neck. That's Sack mom's name.
So there's a lot of bad blood between Melly and these families, to say the very least. The crime. The crime itself is something that has been argued intensively by both sides.
We're going to have a break in the case of a double murder in Miramar.
2 people now behind bars, including a South Florida rapper who actually sings a popular song about murder.
The YNW crew were working late at the recording studio. They finished up and traveled back to a rented house they were all living in. But Juvie and Sack Chaser never made it back and were killed during that ride home. Initially, YNW Bortland arrived at the hospital and said he needed help for his 2 friends who had just been the victims of a drive-by.
Investigators telling us 20-year-old Cortland Henry drove both victims to the hospital, claiming they were victims of a drive-by shooting. The next day, the rapper tweeting, quote, "They took my brothers from me over jealousy."
But then things got a lot more complicated, and detectives came to a different conclusion.
And following their forensic investigation, Wednesday night, police announcing the arrest of YNW Melly and Henry, accusing the rapper of shooting and killing his 2 so-called friends and working with Henry to stage the crime.
When looking into the drive-by shooting, the police found a lot of evidence that didn't stack up. Bortland claims that they drove along on the I-595 to I-75 and exited at Miramar Parkway, and it was off this exit that somebody started opening fire. When investigators came to the scene, there were no shell casings or broken glass along the road, something that you would expect to find after a drive-by shooting. And the police received no calls from the police from that area after the supposed shooting occurred. You would think that the people living along this busy area would be concerned about the double murder which just took place. The police got out a warrant which tracked Melly's location at the time of the crime. It showed that at 4 a.m., Melly was out near the Everglades on Pembroke. When police searched Pembroke, they found tinted glass and shell casings which matched the shell casings found inside the vehicle. Melly had also turned off the location services for his Gmail. CCTV footage from the recording studio adds some interesting details to what happened. Outside of the studio is a red Mitsubishi and a Jeep Compass, and as I mentioned, they were all going back to the same rented house in Miramar. Interestingly, Melly gets inside the Jeep Compass, but when we get to the footage from the hospital, only Bortland, Juvie, and Sack Chaser were present, which begs the question, where did Melly go? Well, according to Melly, he switched cars halfway through the trip. When police were investigating what happened, they first interviewed YNW Taliban, who was in the red Mitsubishi. He told them that Melly changed cars halfway through the trip, but only after the police showed him surveillance footage of him getting into the Jeep Compass. So the fact that he changed his story to suit the undeniable evidence was a bit of a red flag. And the bullets which were shot appeared to have come from inside the vehicle. According to court documents, evidence from the autopsy revealed that both victims' wound paths to their heads were from a left to right direction. This directly contradicts the statements made by Henry and do not support the statements of a drive-by shooting that occurred on the right side of the vehicle. At 4:32 a.m., the cell phone record suggests that Melly left the Jeep. He is then said to have been driven out of the area. 3 minutes after Melly disappeared from the Jeep, Bortland arrived at the hospital. According to police documents, this was a calculated effort to establish their own version of the incident in an attempt to deceive law enforcement. Miramar detective Mark Moretti wrote in affidavit something that does not paint Melly and Bortland in a good light. Bortland seems to have taken a long time to bring them to the hospital, and there seems to be a delay between the time they were shot and the time they arrive at the hospital. According to Moretti, Melly and Bortland drove around with the bodies in the car for a period of time so they could concoct a story about the shooting before they arrived at the hospital. After the shooting, Melly is said to have arrived in the house of the rapper Fredo Bang. In fact, the prosecution are arguing that Melly sent Fredo a drop pin to come pick him up. The people who drove home in the red Mitsubishi got wind of what happened and traveled to Fredo Bang's house too. The fact that they went to a different house suits both stories. Either members of the YNW crew had just been killed in a drive-by, so needed it as a safe haven, or Melly had just killed someone and needed to lay low. The thing that police were particularly interested in is that Melly is alleged to have changed his clothes when he got there, which is another red flag. Jacoby Mills, who was in the red Mitsubishi, was interviewed by police and gave some damning information about what happened next. He said that Bortland later led them out to Woody location where he recovered a gun covered in blood, which their manager said he would take care of. And this weapon was never found by police, even when they searched the manager's house. And Melly would not do himself any favors when it came to proving his innocence. That December, he released a documentary about his life and about the YNW crew. The film closes with the caption, 4 days after the completion of this film, YNW Melly and his friends were the targets of a drive-by shooting in Miami, Florida. And this very documentary quote is mentioned in his arrest documents. It could very well be one of the most damning examples of self-snitching. Why does it say that Melly was a victim when he apparently was not in the car at the time? Melly also sent a Snapchat message to his then-girlfriend praising Bortland, his alleged accomplice. He wrote, "This nigga saved my life. He coming everywhere with me cause of them crackers come grab him. It's my fault you forgot." Melly wrote, "I keep Henry with me cause at the end of the day he did one of the realest shit in my life." With all of that being said, pinning Melly to this crime is not as easy as it seems. Sure, there is evidence that gunshots came from inside the vehicle. However, investigators never located a gun, and gunpowder residue wasn't found on Melly. And another vindicating piece of evidence for Melly is that there is no DNA of his in the car. The police looked through items in the car such as a water bottle, Gucci slides, a spent shell casing, and bloodstains on clothes and a pair of Jordans. None of these items contain Melly's DNA. And remember, the jury are not simply being asked whether Melly did it or not. They are being asked if they think beyond any reasonable doubt that Melly did it. This is a very important distinction. The lack of DNA evidence and gun residue raises a lot of questions as to whether he is actually the guilty party. But Melly's behavior in the courtroom, whether he has been guilty or not, is unusual. It could be the actions of a guilty man, or it could be something a lot more complicated. Bipolar. While Melly's behavior might seem disrespectful, there may be more than what meets the eye. If you look into his mental health background, you will find things that might help explain his behavior. In 2019, Melly got a huge break when he got the chance to work with Kanye on the song Mixed Personalities. This was a song that Ye really took a shine to. In an interview, Melly said,
He was like, "Yeah, man, this is me, man. You know, this is my life. I gotta get on the song, man. You know, yay, Yeezy."
The interviewer then says that Kanye is bipolar, so he can definitely relate to a song named Mixed Personalities. Melly then said that he can relate to it too, and the interviewer then asks him the question.
Well, you're not diagnosed with bipolar or anything like that.
Yeah, I am.
So you
are bipolar. And ADHD.
According to the Mayo Clinic, bipolar disorder, formerly called manic depression, is a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows, depression. Melly's bipolar disorder is not mentioned during the trial, and this could be for a number of reasons. Had Melly pleaded insanity, then it would be up to the defense to prove that Melly was not mentally with it on the day of the crime. But Melly has pleaded innocent, so has not entered much of the discussion. However, this might explain the levels of excitement and joy that we see Melly displaying in the courtroom. Others have pointed out the enormous amount of stress he's under. Picture yourself in his shoes. He's in a double murder trial where there is a substantial amount of evidence indicating that he killed 2 of his childhood friends. This is about as stressful or as emotional as things could possibly get for any human being. As this lawyer explains,
so as you can see with Melly, a lot is going on in his mind. In terms of the pressures that he's facing, remember that he's facing the death penalty, so a lot is riding on this trial. So I'm sure that he was probably sending a prayer and also just asking for some peace or calming down of his mind, but who knows, because we can't get into his mind frame.
And Gain, imagine you are Melly in the courtroom. Your life is being debated back and forth, so it would be very difficult to sit still.
You got to think, for a defendant, for a person that is on trial, especially a person that's on trial for his life, there are a lot of pressures and a lot of things to think about. And as a defendant, you're sitting there and you have to be quiet. You can't respond to what's going on in the courtroom.
So if you think Melly is innocent, then you could give him the benefit of the doubt that he is under extreme levels of stress and already suffers from mental health issues. And of course, if Melly is innocent, then remorse is probably the wrong word. The word remorse implies that Melly has something to be guilty of, which is something that he has denied throughout the trial. But whether Melly is guilty or not, he is basically being incredibly disrespectful to the grieving families watching from the courtroom. What we are seeing from Melly is his apparent inability to read the room or behave in a way that you would expect from a murder trial. For many people who think Melly is guilty, they will point to some rather chilling things. He has said about the multiple personalities he has, in particular, Melvin. In an interview, Melly made the distinction between Melly and Melvin.
Melvin? All right, Melly is loving, genuine, turned up, happy, and just loving, you know what I'm saying? Michael Jackson.
And importantly, Melly has self-control.
He, to an extent, he know how to control his anger.
And then he explains who Melvin is, and he is a person with a lot less self-control.
Melvin, I only let him out at nighttime, and I need to stop doing that. Melvin is just like, once you play with Melly to a certain extent, Melvin just don't like that. Melvin on your ass. No cap. He on your ass. He don't play.
Melly has also mentioned that it is Melvin speaking in the song Murder on My Mind. So you could argue that it is not Melly who may have killed Juvie and Sack Chaser, but Melvin. Juvie and Sack Chaser pushed Melly too far and Melvin jumped in and took them out. An anonymous friend of the YNW crew told Complex News about Melvin. He said, they grew up together and they were like brothers. Melly is a very humble and caring guy, and I don't think he would ever do that to people he called his brothers. Pausing for a moment, the friend adds, on the other side, Melvin be getting into Melly, but I don't think it was him. Melly has also revealed that he has already spent time in a mental institution, which came about because he kept bringing knives into school, and he seems to be smiling and laughing about this time in his life, as if it was a funny anecdote.
Kept bringing knives to school and shit.
So you pulled a knife out on someone in school?
Then I did some terrorist type shit. I was about to slice my neck, slice her neck, fuck it.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Melly spent 7 days in some sort of psychiatric ward after this incident, but moments before he tells this story, he is laughing. This is not the behavior of a mentally stable human being, and it's only when he hears the tone of the two presenters that he stops laughing and realizes that nobody else finds this funny. I'm not a medical expert, so it's not on me to give medical opinions and advice, and it's important to note that most bipolar people are relatively normal people. Mariah Carey and Catherine Zeta-Jones are two people who suffer from being bipolar, but live out fairly ordinary lives. That being said, there are some people that allege that Melly's mental health issues are what have contributed to him killing his two friends. And according to the Treatment Advocacy Center, individuals with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are responsible for approximately 10% of all homicides in the United States. Following this logic, the murders of Juvie and Sack Chaser could have been caused by a moment of madness too. Progress in the trial. Among the evidence used against Melly was a possible confession. When the news broke that Sack Chaser and Juvie had been shot, a friend got in touch with Melly to see if he was okay. Melly's response was chilling.
And Mr. Demmons responds very succinctly, I did that. Shh.
Out of all of the people called to the stand, Felicia Holmes made quite an impression. She is the mother of Melly's ex-girlfriend and was a hostile witness from the get-go.
How are you today?
Not good.
Are you cold?
No, I'm just, you know, I don't feel comfortable.
Are you nervous?
I feel threatened.
But when it came to talking about Melly, she was surprisingly friendly.
See him here in the courtroom?
Yes, I do.
Where is he?
He's right here.
And what's he wearing?
A white turtleneck and a gray jacket.
One of the strongest testimonies for the prosecution came from Sergeant Williams, who looked into the case. He spent hours upon hours looking at bullet wounds, ballistics, and car damage, and came to the conclusion that it was not a drive-by. He was first asked where the shots came from which killed Sack Chaser.
Can you give an area of the car with which the shots emanated from?
Yes.
And could you describe to the ladies and the jury what area of the car did the shots that killed Anthony Williams emanate from?
From the driver's side back seat.
He was then asked where the bullets came from which hit Juvie.
As to the shot that killed Christopher Thomas, where did that shot emanate from?
Driver's side back seat.
He came to the conclusion that they were killed by a single shooter inside the car.
Is it possible for there to have been two shooters inside that car?
No.
Why not?
There is no time.
So explain what that means.
So, Mr. Williams was not even aware he was about to be shot.
And the bullets were shot so fast that Juvie had no time to respond either.
There's no time to switch. It was a very, a rather rapid event of firing.
Detective Moretti is asked to testify about the phone locations. He confirms that Melly's phone is on the same street where shell casings were found.
What area does this depict?
This is the actual crime scene on US 27 Pembroke Road.
And approximately where along Pembroke Road on this map were those casings discovered?
It was on the south side of the road, about 820 meters from US 27.
This evidence is significant. Why is Melly's phone located in this rural area of Florida at 4 a.m.? Towards the end of the trial, the producer Travion Glass was called to the stand. He was traveling in the red Mitsubishi and was asked the burning question, did Melly change his clothes when he got to Fredo Bang's house?
Was Melly wearing the same clothes or different clothes than when you saw him at the studio?
It was a little bit, nah, it wasn't.
Nah, he wasn't You guys
wasn't wearing the same clothes.
The trial culminated in a make-or-break moment. All of the evidence which came forward pointed toward a staged drive, and then there was someone in the car that shot Juvie and Sack Chaser. The only thing saving Melly was the lack of DNA and gun residue. Adrian Davis, a friend of Melly's as well as Juvie and Sack Chaser, had to testify. He was also in the red Mitsubishi and was asked whether Melly changed cars. This could establish once and for all whether he was at the scene of the crime.
Are you 100% sure that this young man got into the red Mitsubishi?
Yes.
It was this bombshell testimony that may have influenced the final vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may now retire to continue with your deliberations.
There was clearly tension within the jury. They were not all on the same page, as evidenced by the fact that they spent 2 days coming to their decision. But this is not a case where you would rush to make a decision. And after carefully going through all of the evidence, their verdict was announced.
Today, the judge in the YNW Melly double murder case declared a mistrial after the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision.
Ultimately, it went to a mistrial, meaning the trial needs to start all over again. Sometimes a mistrial means that the charges will be dropped, but in the case of a double murder, they will definitely seek a double murder. At the moment, Melly continues to be in the limbo of either being guilty or not guilty of these crimes. How the vote was split during this trial depends on who you ask. Melly's mother initially posted that it was 9-3 in favor of Melly being found not guilty. However, the Atlanta journalist at One Go to Lexus actually claimed that it was a straight 6 split, but even that score was up for the debate. An anonymous juror told the Florida news outlet Local 10 News that Melly's life was saved by the skin of his teeth. This person is reported to have said that it was a 9-3 vote in favor of Melly being guilty, and 2 jurors changed their mind at the last second. This person said that it was one manipulative woman that swayed it. It was initially 11-1 in favor of convicting Melly, but she pulled the 2 jurors aside, and suddenly it was 9-3, and she managed to change their minds. The anonymous juror said, from day one, she had issues with the 4 persons selected, at one point crossing her arms and saying she was done. When another juror asked to not shut down and set her feelings aside, she exploded, the anonymous juror claimed in an interview with the outlet. She was explosive, manipulative, she was rude, she yelled insults at anyone who had a different opinion. She was there to cause chaos. So if this is true, Melly should be forever indebted to this woman. And whether you think Melly is guilty or not guilty, I think the lack of closure given to the families of Juvie and Sack Chaser is something we can all agree is long overdue. The next trial should be starting once again in October.